Hey guys, so there are only a few more days before Cinemalaya 2014 comes to a close, and I obviously can't give you every single review for every single movie yet because I haven't seen every single movie yet, but I've seen 5 so far, so we'll talk about those. So this is part 1 of 3 of my Cinemalaya coverage. Alright, so let's get right into it. The first movie I saw was Ronda, directed by Nick Olanka. This movie is about a policewoman played by Aida Alas who is pretty much doing her nightly round, her nightly shift, and she's kind of looking out for her son who has not reported back home for a few days. Now, please, if you have seen my previous Cinemalaya video, please don't pay attention to the synopsis I gave there for this movie because I was just reading it from the website, but that synopsis I gave was actually a huge spoiler, so please don't pay attention to it. But anyway, the thing with this movie is that Aya de las Alas in the Philippines is known as this huge comedic star, and it's great how she gives this amazing understated performance. I think because it's just so surprising to me when a comedic actor is able to prove that he or she has the capacity to show so much depth and so much deep-seated emotion. The cinematography also in this movie is great because it's nighttime Manila mostly, and the way they show it, it's not doused in neon or anything. It really is just dark and empty and abandoned and stuff. And I think it does a great job adding to the mood. However, my problem with this movie is I think the director Nick Olanka, plays the art house card a bit too much. Like a lot of this movie is very very slow paced, and at a certain point, I really didn't feel the need for it to be slow paced because I kind of get that a lot of this movie is about the boredom of routine life and stuff, and I got that point early on, but then the movie just kept being slow paced, and for me it just came off as just trying to kill time. But the slow pace, I think, did the disservice to the themes, like all these themes that this movie is trying to juggle, because this movie never actually went in depth into any of them. It just kind of talked about them for like 2 seconds and then went on to something else. And I think the themes just ended up getting lost in the boredom. And literally, the moment you feel like the plot is about to kick into high gear and get into an actual plot, it ends. Like the movie just ends, and I really didn't like that because it was so abrupt and it didn't do anything for the characters. It didn't do anything. It didn't say anything about the themes or anything. So it just ended. So I will say Ronda is it's you don't really need to go out and see it. And the second movie I watched was #Why, directed by Gina Santos. And contrary to my belief, this movie was not going to be a clone of The Animals. In fact, that was Gina Santos' first movie, but this movie is really centered on this kid named Miles, an affluent, rich kid, obviously, and he's played by Elmo Magalona, and pretty much this entire movie is about him dealing with his suicidal tendencies, and the entire movie is just him kind of interacting with his friends and stuff, and going to counseling. Now, Gina Santos, thankfully, I think, is much more in control of his directorial style this time. He holds back a lot more, but at the same time, he's able to be more versatile while, really just focusing on select themes and characters. And, the actors he has here actually, I think, do great jobs, especially for me, Elmo Magalona, because, he's different when he's alone and he's different when he's with friends. Like, you can really see the difference and it feels very natural. Also, the editing in this movie is very, very tight. It's very, very smart. Also, it's probably some of the best editing you'll see in a local movie this year. And the cinematography is fantastic. Also, like there are certain scenes. The ones that stand out to me the most are the party scenes. Like there are certain scenes that are just like it's all strobe lights and it's all green and stuff, and it just looks so scary, but at the same time just really fascinating. And I've never seen like a party presented that way. However, I do have a few problems with this movie. Some of them are actually very, very serious. I'll go into those later. But smaller problems I had were, I think, for one, the tone kind of gets lost and confused like a lot of the time in this movie. Like this movie, very clearly, I think, is trying to be both a comedy and a drama, like a dark comedy of sorts. And I think the comedy sometimes overpowers the drama a lot because they do the comedy stuff so well, in my opinion, that when the dramatic moments come, like they don't hit as hard as they want to. And I have a pet peeve with how when movies try to depict upper middle class or high class kids, they try to put in just lots of like random English and Filipino words into the script to make it all Taglish in random places and make them sound conyo. But for here, I think it was done a bit too much at certain points, to the point that I didn't believe that they were real, because I thought it was just too much of a caricature at that point. However, my biggest problem in this movie is actually quite serious, and I really feel the need to talk about it. It's about the ending, and I really just don't like the ending. The more I think about it, the more I'm disturbed and unsettled by it, because most of this movie is about, depicts suicide in a certain way. And in my opinion, at least, when your movie is about suicide, if that's a major theme, you have the responsibility as a filmmaker to not deal with it lightly, because suicide, for me at least, is a very, very loaded topic. It's very complex, and the way they present it here, I think, is just way too simplified, and to the point that I actually think the ending is offensive. It's so hard to talk about this topic, but all I was looking for was, for the director to give insight into suicide, and it seems like he does something near the end where he just kind of takes it all back and simplifies it again. So I didn't really understand why he had to do that, and I think I was just so disturbed by it, because in my opinion, this movie really does glorify suicide, and that's not cool. Again, the argument could be made that it's supposed to be slice of life. You're not supposed to get a straight answer. Sometimes stuff happens in life, and we don't really get the explanation, and I understand that. However, against the argument of it being a slice of life movie, I don't think this movie is a slice of life movie, because it's a character study, number one, and number two, if this is slice of life, it doesn't really depict many sides to this life at all. Like, it really is kind of one perspective, at least in my opinion. It's not as scathing an indictment of this generation as the animals, but still, the way they portray the kids here, I think sometimes it's very misrepresentative, because like, again, I just couldn't believe that the kids in this movie were, like this the entire time. Like, I feel like there is definitely more to these guys, and if this is based on any truth at all, and these kids are like this shallow, then they're they're not good characters, at least to me. So, like, there's no win here. And anyway, this all boils down to how I thought the ending was handled very, very poorly, and very bad taste. And I just don't glorify suicide. That's just, why would you do that? I mean, I get some movies want to try to be morbid, but the ending of this movie just went against, I think, everything else is building up to. So in the end, I'd say hashtag Bwaya is just an okay movie. Like, I cannot deny the technical skill and the amazing performances and direction, but if you want to see this movie, please get the right message from it, please. Anyway, moving on to lighter things. I'm sorry. The third movie I watched was The Janitor, directed by Mike DeViera. It's about this former cop played by Dennis Trillo, who kind of has to do this under the table job to assassinate certain people who were involved in a bank robbery massacre. And for me, The Janitor is just fun viewing, really. What makes it fun is that it has a very unique structure, I think, compared to a lot of the other movies this year, is because it is very episodic at certain points. It becomes quite obvious also what it's leading up to, somewhere in the middle, but it's still very fun to watch. It's very cool, I think, in a very campy way, but because of that, it never really loses intrigue. Like, you're always just in the story, even if you kind of know where it's heading. And the sense of style in this movie, in my opinion, is just undeniable. From the wheel that the corrupt police guys use to punish certain people, to just the masks that the bank robbers wear, to the way Dennis Trillo's character does the sign of the cross every time he kills somebody. Like, all these little touches just add to the world so much, and I was really enjoying it. And I'm honestly a sucker for stuff that deals with there being no clear-cut heroes or villains, and every character in this movie is pretty flawed. And like, by the end of the movie, it gets quite dark, but like not too dark, so like I can believe it. However, you really just do have to put up with the campiness, because sometimes it gets way too much, and like I mentioned, it does get really, really obvious, and the episodic stuff gets kind of tiring by the end. There's also an occasional lack of focus in this movie. Like, they sacrifice time that could have been spent fleshing out Dennis Trillo's character or the family he has around him, and they sacrifice that time to expand on the supporting characters who we don't really need to know about. So yeah, but in the end, I'd actually say The Janitor is a pretty good movie. Like, check it out. Like, it's a fun time, even if I have no idea why it's called The Janitor, because there's no real janitor in the movie. Anyway, the fourth movie I watched was Bwaya, directed by Francis Pachon, and this is about a family who's trying to deal with the loss of this daughter because she was attacked by a crocodile. Now, the first thing you have to talk about when you talk about Bwaya is the fact that it looks incredible. Like, the cinematography in this movie is so mind-blowingly gorgeous. Like, I could just stare at it all day. And what's so great about the cinematography is that I think it tells the story so much better than the actual like dialogue and actual uh, plot and stuff. Like, through mood alone that these shots establish, it just it adds so much to the story. And sometimes you're seeing the exact same landscape, but at a different time of day with different lighting from a different angle of sorts, and it's completely different. Like, it's fantastic cinematography. Aside from that, Anjali Bayani, who I'd argue is the main actress in this movie, gives a great performance. She is so natural in this role. Even if her character doesn't really have so much to work with, she makes the grief really felt. And the young actress who plays Rowena, the kid who eventually gets attacked by a crocodile, I think she is also very genuine. You care a lot for her. However, again, problems with this movie is that we're really not given that much to chew on. Like, there's so much room here, I think, for substance, especially the fact that it's based on a true story. And sometimes this movie tries to go into those deeper topics, but it just does not at all. So, we're just kind of left with a slow-paced story that is just extremely straightforward. That spends a bit way too much time on the formalities and just looking for the body of this girl. And I really took issue also with director Francis Pachon's decision to make this sort of like a quasi documentary, and the documentary parts and stuff just don't work at all. It feels like they were left in there accidentally by the editors, and it just does not work. And for that, I would say Bwaya is still like an okay movie. Like, you can still go out and see it if you're really that curious. And finally, the fifth movie I watched was Canada Dreamweaver, directed by Aida Del Mundo. This is about, I forgot what tribe they were in, I'm sorry, but it's about this indigenous Filipino tribe. It centers on this main character, this girl named Kana, who is being kind of groomed to become a dream weaver. She makes ethnic cloths and all that. And there's some sort of trouble going on with their clan and the clan from the north, and eventually she has to kind of decide if she will unite these two tribes, but only through kind of forgetting and rejecting her true love. Kanata Dreamweaver really is like a tribute to this culture, and it's nice to see like the culture put front and center for this movie. Like, it's always very interesting to watch all these like different rituals, the things they have going on. One thing in particular that I thought really stood out, and for me it's my favorite thing in the movie, is the music. Like, I thought the music was great. Like, I have this thing for indigenous music that I just find so pleasing to the ears, and it was used very, very well here. However, despite all of that, the story really never develops through the different cultural aspects. We're shown different rituals again, like the actual weaving, the marriage ceremony, a funeral ceremony, and we're shown all these things, but it feels like a documentary. Like, we're just being shown them. There's no thread really going through them. Like, when this movie actually goes into the plot and the story, it just feels like a distraction. And bigger problem also, something went wrong in post production, because a lot of things weird, like, it's like they ran out of budget, because suddenly, like, the longer this movie goes on, the more like fake CGI they have, and there's some terrible editing choices here. Like, I don't know why every shot has to end in a fade out, but it just doesn't work. It just drags things out, and like they have these weird like After Effects kind of things, like floating spots, and I get those are supposed to be like dream sequences, but no, they don't look like dream sequences. So in the end, I'd say Canada Dreamweaver is also, like, you again don't really have to see it. All right, so that's a quick for me overview of the 5 movies I've seen so far. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have seen these 5 movies or any other Cinemalaya movies, just tell me what you thought of it, and tell me what you think of Cinemalaya this year. And whether you agree or disagree with me, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.